Hello, I'm Cecilia Louie of Paper Zen. In this video, I'll be showing you how to outline the letter T, and then afterwards, I'll show you how to fill it in with these lovely tulips. If you've purchased my book, Quilling Letters, you will have a letter T, but it's going to be different from this one that I'm showing you right here. So come to my blog and download this one for free. It's a little different because it's in a 5.5 inch square, and you'll actually, if you took a ruler, you would see that this distance and this distance is actually the same. And normally when I do things in my book, I'll give a little bit more leeway to the bottom because otherwise it tends to be too heavy. I find if I push it up a little, it will look a bit more balanced on the card. However, there's always an exception to a rule, right? The letter T, because the positive space here is heavier on the top and less so on the bottom, there's more negative space here, it actually felt more comfortable, to my eye at least, to balance it exactly the same. So it just kind of depends on what project you're working on, but this is the one that I'm going to be using for this project, so you're free to download that in case you want to make the same kind of project for a friend. Now this is the other portion of the template that I'm allowing you to download for free. Don't mind all this mess. It's actually, I deliberately did that so after I've measured all my pieces out, I just kind of took an X-Acto knife and made 2 slits and slipped the paper in between so that it's held in place and I'm not going to lose all the pieces. I know everyone is here. And so these are the pieces to make the tulips, and as you can see, blossom 1 is for the first flower and so on, and over here where it says blossom 2 and 3, so in other words you need 2 of the same pieces to create those flowers. And so this is just my way of making sure I'm not losing any pieces. It's kind of like a parking lot for my pieces, and to remember I've got everything in order. And the reason why I'm doing it on a 5.5 inch square is because it's quite a self-contained design. I'm not going to be extending too much further beyond the letter itself, so I really wanted to make sure it wasn't an overly large card. So it also helps that I have a whole stack of 8.5 by 11 sheets of cardstock, so I'm just going to trim the sheet down so it's 5.5 here, and then when I fold it, it's going to be 5.5 square. So I've already got the letter traced onto the card, so we'll start quilling on that soon. But before I do, I just wanted to show you, whenever I work with a card, do you see that sort of air gap right there? I don't like pressing down on things because it kind of feels like I'm on an air bed or something. So I'm just going to unfold that, and then it'll sit more docilely on my surface so you're not bouncing up and down when you're gluing down on that. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, I've already got my letter T measured and pre-folded, and the paper I'm using here is by Canson. It's called Miton. It's a little bit thicker than standard quilling paper, and I've cut it to 1/4 inch thick. If you look down in the show notes below, you'll see more details about all the items that you see here. This is the type of glue that I use most often. It's called Aleene's Original Tacky Glue, and I'm just going to pour a bead right there and smear my little bead flat. The card that I'm using here is very thin. It's just the transport card that I got from Singapore when I was traveling there, and I like it because I can slip it underneath the letter as I go. And I'm just going to turn my card to the side because the sunlight's coming this direction so I can see my lines here better. And I'm just going to put my, I have another transport card and it's a lot thicker, so I'm just going to put that onto my card and line it up the best that I can and allow for the thickness of this paper here along that edge using some removable tape. This way you're not going to damage your paper when you take it off. And I'm just going to visualize where that strip is going to end up being. And I feel comfortable in doing this strip as well as this one at the same time, but you can just do whatever suits you, okay? So I'm just going to strategically dip into my glue, and because I've smeared it flat, I'm not going to get glue up the sides of the strip. I'm just going to move along and dip as I go. I'm just going to move that out of my way in case I accidentally blob where I don't want to. Okay, so I've secured this part down, and with this hand I've actually got the strip up in the air. So this part here hasn't touched the paper yet. And what I'm going to do is just gently tug a little bit in that direction, just so that, do you see that little kink? It must have been during the storage and stuff. I just want to pull it straight and then align with this plastic card to get a straight strip down. Now we can remove this card. And now you can see why doing it on such a thin card here is so helpful, so that I can slip it underneath the strip. Because it would be a little bit harder on a thicker card, I believe. And then just because it is so thin, I'm just going to raise it up in the air as I go to dip the rest of this strip, just in case this part might touch the card, and that's not what we would want. Now I'm going to put the oyster card here for now, and because it's this part's already down, I'm just going to use, I'm pulling this way now because I don't want any little curvature in my strip to happen like this. I want a gentle tug this way. And then using the oyster card as a ruler, I'm going to set that down. I guess I generally don't use it for the smaller parts because, you know, it's not going to flex too much. So, and again, I'm just going to tackle this strip and this strip at the same time. And I'll position the card so that I get both sides dipped at the same time, but not this part. And if you need to adjust before the glue dries, you still have some forgiveness to move it around if you need. Then I bring the oyster card back, and I'm just going to use it as a door stopper right there so that this strip doesn't end up being too far this way or too far that way. It just has like a gentle hold right there. Takes the guesswork out, right? So I'm going to dip, and I'm just going to bring it up in the air just so I don't smear where I don't want it to, and I'm just going to tackle both sides at the same time. So again, I'm just gently pulling this way with my tweezers. And I'm just running out of plastic here, but I guess I just want to let it really settle down with a straight edge. That's how we outline the letter T. If you haven't already done so, please visit my blog and download this free template. It's in the links below. And if you have a moment and you do something with these tulips on one of your own projects, I would love, love, love to see it. There's nothing that gives me joy more to see how other people are using these designs to further their own quilling. And I'd love to hear how people react to your work. It makes this whole process feel not so alone, and it just basically makes me feel like I'm making a difference in people's lives. So to start with blossom number 1, I've already got this strip measured out. So, and I've already pre-folded my score lines. So I'm going to take my needle and just soften the strip. And do you see how one side is soft and the other side also needs to be softened? So then what happens is one side, do you see that part 4? So that's on the right hand side here, and what it's going to do is just form like that. So I'm just going to dip this end, which was number 1 here, into some glue, and I'm going to fold it into the middle fold right here. And then I'm going to dip the other end. And I generally like to use tweezers because then I can place it exactly where I want it to go. And I basically want the 2 corners to be somewhat even. But you know what? If it's not a big deal, because nature is perfect in its imperfections. So if it's a little off, don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. Now this is the little guy right there. And we can just kind of soften the paper even though there's so little of it. It does make a little bit of difference to give it a bit of curl to it. And I'm just going to dip both ends into my glue. And then I'm going to place it just on top. Simple, right? Then I'm going to take the stem and just soften it slightly. Dip that into the glue. And generally when I dip it, do you see how little glue is on that strip? It's what I call kissing the glue, because we just want a little touch of the glue, very little. The less there is, the faster it'll hold. You really don't need to glob it on. Okay, I probably softened that a bit too much, but not a big deal to kind of just gently straighten him out again, or her. Okay, so where I want this flower to go is right here. See, I can tell right away, okay, I did curl it just a little bit too much. So again, not a big deal. I'll just straighten out this part here with my fingers. See how I'm forcing that and it doesn't like it because my curve, it's not natural. Your eyes can tell you, right? And of course I'm doing this a bit too rushed because I'm on a video, I guess, and I want to basically make this part here feel natural. So my eye is continuing this line, and do you see how it doesn't meet up there? So visually your eye can tell you something's a little off. Now you see when I'm tucking the head back, do you see how more natural that looks? Because it's like a continuation of that line. Ah, you know what? And I'm working away and I realized I haven't glued that corner closed. So let me just take a little dab of glue there and fix that right now. And always have some tissue on hand so you can blot any of your instruments and not carry excess glue around and making a mess of any other parts of your work. So okay, back to that conversation. So I fixed that curve a little to make sure that your eye follows smoothly. So it's still a little off, so I'm just going to straighten a little bit more. And when I go to glue, I can also position as I need as well, right? It's not like this has to be where I'm seeing it right now. I think that's okay for now, and I'll just start working on blossom 2 and 3. So similar to that one, I'm just going to soften the entire strip. Now in this case, what I want to do is, this is a more fully opened blossom, and this one's going to be one that's, you know, it's still tucked closed, and so I want the outside part, they're all the same segments, by the way. These 3 segments, they're all the same size, so it doesn't matter which one you're tucking in and stuff. So what I'm going to do is allow this one to tuck on the outside of the blossom because it's a young bud. So I'm going to open this up, dip it into the glue, tuck it into the fold, and then I'm going to dip that other strip, and again with tweezers I'm going to guide it where I want. Now it might bounce back, but not a big deal. What I want to do is, you know, it's a very important step, is to bring it down to my surface. Okay, I think I didn't put enough glue, or maybe because this edge here is touching here and I dipped more like there, that's not quite where I need to dip. I need to dip just a hint more like on this side. I hope that makes sense. So in other words, not like that, but more like that. I kind of feel like when I'm learning how to make pasta, so a little dry but not too dry. Or cooking. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not so great at cooking. Like, oh, a little bit of salt but not too much. Well, how much is a little bit? There. And that looks like a bud that is full of promise. And then the stem, we're just going to soften just like we've done this time. And again, placing it on your work surface allows you to make all those edges even. And that way when you go to glue to your final card, you don't have all these different surfaces to work with. Now you're going to be making 2 of these. So I'm just going to skip and not have you watch me do the whole process yet again. I'm going to come to the leaves, and we're making 2 of these according to the directions here. And I've already pre-folded here, so what I want to do here is just dip, again, not like this, but more like this. I want to actually take a little bit more glue. Can you see that? I hope you can see that. So I want just a little hint of that edge touching the glue. And I want to bring that closed. This is where the magic happens. What we're going to do is use our tool and just kind of gently shape one way, turn it around, and we're going to make it into an S shape. And then what happens is when you go to separate these 2 layers, it's going to create a leaf. Just that easy, right? And then sometimes what I like to do is soften within that leaf. And then that's going to let me place it right there. And coincidentally, if you happen to have my book, Pretty Quilled Cards, and you're trying to figure out how to do the house for a happy housewarming card, that's actually how I did this smoky chimney coming out from there, and that's, you know, like the same kind of methodology. So as these pieces get made, you can just place them into the letter T without any glue. I tend to do things without any glue just to make sure, are they the right size? Are they positioned well? And I figure out all these elements before I go to glue the final thing. Okay, so I'm just going to create another leaf, create another tulip bud, and work with those ones on the other side. Okay, I hope you guys are finished with your blossoms. Now, as for how to place them, for the leaves, remember how you joined on one side? Generally, I don't tend to show that joint on the top. I generally try to hide it wherever I can. So in this case, because, you know, the human eye is not going to pick it out as readily here as it is there. So I'm going to hide the seam end on this side. Same with the leaf here. So basically go ahead and place these elements into the letter T as you like. And then for this leaf here, I put the seam end right into that corner. And for this one, I plan to just, you know, raise it up just a little bit, because that's how leaves grow, right? In stages like that. And it gives it kind of some movement that way when you give the eye something asymmetrical to look at. And you can open up the leaf a little further if you like, or a little closed. I think for me, I want it just a little bit closed. And I'm just going to follow along that letter side, the vertical line here. Now that you've already laid out all your flowers, and I had some leftover spaces in here, I felt that the letter T was a little weak this way without any structure around it, so I really wanted to fill in those areas, but not with any color, because I didn't want it to take away from the flowers. So I cut some paper that's similar to this cardstock here to make it kind of blend in. And I find generally I tend to do that kind of filling in with some S scrolls. So to do that, I just softened one side and flip it over and soften the other side. So I have a S shape here, and I'm just going to start coiling in that direction, and then flip it over and coil in the opposite direction. Now you're wondering, okay, so how is that going to fill that space? So what I do is I tend to open it up and recoil it by hand. Open that up and recoil by hand. Now, do you see a little bit of a kink right there? So I just kind of gently soften that up just to smoothen that transition out. And then I'll just insert it to wherever it suits it. Now you wonder, okay, visually this space here is larger than this space, and if you'll notice in the pattern it's actually the same size. So I did that deliberately because I wanted to show you it's really not as critical as you might think that the sheet or the strip is whatever size it is. I just find I massage the coils to suit my space. So it's the same, sheet of paper, and we can make things fit wherever we need it to. It might look a little different, so okay, if you really want to, you can open it up again and reposition things to be a certain way. If you want to, you can even, what I've done is open this up, trim that end a little if you want to. And just basically, I like to have that innermost coil quite tight. So I will get myself started on that again and recoil it. So I've just taken off a little bit, but you don't have to. It just depends on whether you feel that you like that look. Then for this bottom corner here is the C scroll. So I'm going to soften on both sides because you see this part here is straight, so I'm just going to soften that part as well. And then open it up and re-ravel it by hand, just to suit that space. You find it, it just kind of lends itself to quilling kind of methods, and it just kind of fills up the space. It strengthens up the letter T. When you go to glue everything in place, make sure that you pick up a little bit of glue and just kind of slip it in between where those two pieces of paper meet, and you'll use some tweezers to basically crimp that closed, and you'll have a stronger bond that way, and your quilling won't get destroyed while you're waiting to give it to your friend. For everyone who have left me comments, thank you so much. I love reading about how my tutorials are helping you in your quilling. Your enthusiasm for this art form is what gives me energy. If you're using social media, I'd love to see your work. Tag me in your photos. Thanks for watching.